You should be live, or we should be live.
We're live. Okay, everybody, hello and welcome. Oh, wait on. Now I'm seeing a big screen just with the Searching for Skylab screen. So I will start talking as if we are live. So thank you, everyone who's joined us tonight for a very special occasion. We have the privilege of speaking to Amy Sue Bean, who is the daughter of Alan Bean, who was on Apollo 12, walked on the moon, and who was also the commander of Skylab SL3, the second manned mission up to the fantastic space station. I'm biased, as you can see, that has inspired me in particular. I've done a few books on Skylab, and as you can see, the film reels in the background contributed to the film Searching for Skylab, which it was an absolute honor and a privilege to be able to tell the legacy of Skylab. Amy, we got to know each other through Space Fest that is organized by the Poor family. Kelsey Poor in particular pulls all the strings, and we were showing the film there, and I remember I was speaking to you and your mum and invited you to come and have a look at it, and I can tell you it was a nerve-wracking experience, because I did a film about almost like an abstract thing, and then there's you, a real person who was related to one of the men on the film, and I was just like, oh, please let me have done everything correctly. And turns out I did. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining us. Great to see you here.
Well, thank you, Dwight. I appreciate you asking me to be here. And I remember the screening of the film. It was just really a few months after Dad had passed away. So it was very emotional for me. And I think you even remember I had to get up and leave in the middle when he came on. And I think it was just, Skylab, well, all of Dad's time, or really any time with him, he was so happy then. And seeing the film of him on the space station, doing the flips or doing the experiments with the crew, that was something else, because I know that was such a important part of his life. And he always used to say that he felt he was his best astronaut when he was on Skylab. People remember him for walking on the moon, but he always said, I was a rookie when I walked on the moon. Pete commanded us. Dick they had already been up in space. So didn't know that much. I had to follow what Pete had to say. He was our leader, great astronaut. He goes, but as a Skylab commander, I felt I had come into my own, and we had accomplished so much. So I kept thinking that when I saw your film, and how proud he was of that time. And well, it was just, I'm just so grateful that you did make that film. And it was such an important part of space history. I think often now the men and women on ISS, and I hope that they learn lessons from Skylab.
Apparently they do. We were at ESTEC in the Netherlands, which is the European Space Agency Centre, and we asked one of the scientists there, and he said, yeah, we definitely used data from Skylab to help plan our missions. And he also made a surprising announcement that the data that they have from Skylab has not yet been fully analysed, because they don't have enough scientists to go through all this data. And I thought, wow, that was 44 years after the event. And I thought, wow. And I know for a fact as well, Russia in the headlines at the moment, but the Russians were extremely happy back in the 90s to have the readings, the biometric readings and everything that they did on Skylab to help them plan for the Mir missions. And they were very grateful to NASA for having that material available to help them plan. I personally am very grateful that Skylab crashed in my homeland, because that gave me the impetus of this thought about Skylab since I was 10 years old. And if you had told me back then how involved I would be with the people who actually flew on Skylab, I wouldn't have believed the word you said. So now, Amy, we've got you here as well because it's we're highlighting women in the space industry, and you're special because you're the daughter of an astronaut. You have also had very close contact with the space industry. You are preserving your dad's legacy. So what thoughts do you have about your place in history? I mean, you are a part of it, even if so much as involuntarily, but you were part of it. You're on photos. You can see your family, your mum, and everybody at home. There was a special on one of the news channels where they highlighted the wives of Skylab. How was it for you growing up?
Well, so to answer a couple of the questions that you asked there, I see myself as a storyteller. I see myself as a person that has I always say on the ground, and I guess I don't have in space, but on the ground knowledge of what that time was like. Of course, I was a little girl during a lot of it, and you process memories and events completely different as a child than you would as an adult. But at the same time, I talked to both my parents. Of course, my mother's still living, doing well. She's 87, lives down the street from me, see her almost every day. And so I can tell the stories of what she's told me as a wife who was there. And a lot of those stories are the emotions of the moment. And the guys tend to focus on the technology or the science or the leadership or the mission. So I tend to have also the stories from my mother of like I said, the families and the emotion. I've also talked recently, this was just a couple months ago, really, to like Jane Conrad. And so I have a connection to these folks. And, we perceive it differently a little bit just because, we weren't in space, but we were supporting the guys at that time, just the guys that went into space and mostly the wives. So I see myself as a storyteller. Recently, interesting enough, I don't try to get into Twitter debates or anything like that, but I did participate in one when somebody who was questioning whether men landed on the moon. And I said, I decided as a person who was there, who grew up with somebody who did that, who lived with somebody who did that, that was my father, that I'm not going to let people try to wipe out that part of history. And people will. Experts claim as the farther we get from an event, the more people will be skeptical that it occurred. But I was there, so I don't want us to take it. I don't want to, it's not something that we need to focus on every moment. We're focusing on the future. But we don't want to forget that moment. We don't want to forget that part of American history, a part of world history, how important it was. So, yeah, I see that as my role too, as a woman who was there as a child, but as it was there. And so I'm going to keep that flame alive. That's part of, I think, what the children of astronauts have to do. They keep the flame alive so people don't forget what an accomplishment this was for human civilization.
Yeah, definitely. For me, my personal 180-degree view change on Skylab, it was plagued with problems when it launched. And of course, it crashed in Australia. And I always saw the crash in Australia as probably the worst thing NASA could have ever let happen to it, until I spoke to a gentleman called Mark Pestana. Yeah. He said to me, you have no idea the amount of data we got from the crash allowed us to set the benchmark for every other space object that has come back to Earth. And that's where I was like, whoa, I never even considered that would be something that people would be grateful to have. And something of that size to come back down to Earth, it allowed them to do, to analyze data that would not have been possible before. And I thought, wow, even in what I thought was its worst moment, it actually ended up being a triumph. And that's why I called the film, the subtitle, America's Forgotten Triumph, because people forget this. This is like, coming back to what you're saying, they forget the things that Skylab brought the world, the observations of crop and so forth that allowed humans to better look after agriculture. They were studying hurricanes. They were studying even the migration of plankton near South America, near the Galapagos Islands, if I remember correctly. And I thought this would have not been possible with any other means other than a space station orbiting the Earth and seeing what was going on. Now, I'm going to switch topics here, and you're going to have to explain the actions of your mum. I have it on good authority that the wives of Skylab 3 developed their own mission patch.
Yes.
And somehow those mission patches got sent up to Skylab. So could you tell our viewers what happened there?
Yes. Now there's a different renditions of this, but this is what my mother says. So that's a pretty strong authority, wife of the commander of the mission. And so she said what happened was there was a journalist by the name of Jacques Tussaud, and he was a French journalist active in covering space. And he came up with the idea of the women's patch. And then he developed it with a local artist down the street from us, and a woman whose name happens to be Ardis Settle, Ardis, Ardis Settle. So they developed the patch together. And the wives were supportive and said, this is a great idea. And so then the wives asked Deke Slayton, can we somehow get this patch on the space station so that when the guys arrive, that they will see it. And so they had to have Deke's approval, and he thought it was a great idea. You know, they always have some level of humor and practical jokes, you know, with them. And so they had it put on the Skylab space station so that when the men arrived, they saw it when they came into the space station. And that's the story from my mom. I've heard different renditions, and of course that was many, many years ago. But that's the story of the women's Skylab patch. And Dad always says he was so surprised to see that when he got up there. And the women just they were excited to do that. And of course that's been kind of a unique patch in space history even to today.
It's a great story. It's a great story. The patch is very similar to the mission patch as well. I thought that was hilarious when we interviewed your mum for the film, and she and Gracia Lausner were telling the story. I'm like, oh, this is gold. Now that was something fairly fun. What I'm curious to know, we consider, and a lot of people consider, that what was achieved up on Skylab and even on Apollo was achieving the impossible. Mm-hmm. How do you see that? How did it feel like for you?
Well, I think, and I'll be frank about it, a lot of the thoughts that I have on it are thoughts that my dad's conveyed to me. And you know, that's what happens when you're a child or even an adult child. You know, you listen to what your parents say and they have more knowledge. And so you process it and then add your own. But I think what I have thought in my life from what he said and just observing is that it was a time, and I think even now they have that too, that this people came together, and these were very, I want to say average people. They didn't seem like special people. You know, they obviously were special and smart engineers and scientists and men and women, but they didn't seem that way. They didn't all go to, you know, super fancy schools or have, you know, really advanced degrees. But they had a dream and they had a goal, and that was to get man to the moon. And I'm really focusing on that. And a lot of them were, of course, very young, and they were ambitious and they cared. And, you know, I have to say, getting man to the moon, they were worried the Cold War was on, right? And so they knew they had to beat the Russians. And that was at the top of their mind. Not only was scientific exploration, but really it was a lot about, you know, showing that democracy and freedom is a better way. So yes, these people came together as a team, and they didn't become discouraged really. If they expected failures, of course they are going to have failures, but they would learn from them and then move on. And of course, they had a lot of money to do it. That makes a big difference if you can keep doing that. And they had mostly the American people in the world behind them. But yeah, Dad used to say, you never know what you can do. You just totally underestimate what you're capable of accomplishing. But he said that was one of the things that he would come to NASA and he'd think, wow, I'm sitting around this table and we're going to send men to the moon. And we did, with just perseverance and hard work and not giving up and teamwork. So it was I think people should be inspired by that. When they talk about the moonshot, I mean, they don't realize how we didn't know anything. He used to say, we didn't know how to build a lunar module. We didn't know how to rendezvous. We didn't have materials for our visors. We had to invent all that. And so, it's an inspirational time. But I look at the things, it's not as well publicized, but I think of the things that the ISS does, or any NASA, or even over at SpaceX too. Obviously, it's amazing what they do when they get together. I still believe humans can I think humans can solve any problem if they want to. I truly believe that.
Yeah. Look at for example, in the Apollo program, Apollo 13, how this collective group came together and worked out a way to get those guys back home in one piece. I always say to my wife that this is a textbook on how you manage things, because it's incredible what they achieved. The other thing that always gets me is on the Apollo 11 landing, when they get the 12:02 and the 12:01 alarm. We're listening to the audio, and I timed it 18 seconds. It took them to come up with the solution to that. I'm talking to you now, I get goosebumps, because I'm thinking they planned for every single contingency. And when this alarm came up, it was a case of, it's okay, we're still going. Yeah, like, wow. I know there's certain coaches and so forth that tell you, you should never have a plan B because you need to be focused on succeeding. And I'm thinking, no, you have to have the plan Bs, Cs, Ds, and Es up until the end of the alphabet, because that's how you get to do the lunar landing, how you get to salvage Skylab with using a parasol and so forth. I mean, this lateral thinking is what appeals so much to me.
I think so. The other thing I think they do well, and I assume they still do it well, is they don't dwell on, like, I think often, Apollo 12's the lightning striking the rockets, very famous, SCE to AUX, very famous time. But I'll tell you what, once that problem was solved and they were up in Earth orbit, they didn't dwell on it anymore. I mean, they knew they'd have to go back and figure it out, but they solved that problem because they knew something else had to be done to move forward. So I think that's another thing. They don't dwell on problems. They just try to, what's the next thing we've got to tackle to get us to our goal? And certainly they looked back, but that was, I have to say, and I've said this, I think I've told you this, Dwight. When my dad came back from the moon, I never remember him ever talking about that moment at our home, SCE to AUX, or, maybe briefly, but really it wasn't anything that he said, oh, thank God we solved that. Oh, thank God, goodness that we knew. I mean, he just went on to the next thing, which was Skylab, because he and Pete pretty quickly after that knew they were going to be on Skylab. So he focused on the moon in the sense that learned from it, but he didn't dwell on that past victory or anything. He moved on to the next problem. What do we have to do now for space, for NASA, to be a better astronaut? I've often thought about that. Yeah, that's a moment in history, but yeah, they just had to keep going, moving forward. You don't dwell on everything that happened in the past.
Speaking of that, I've got a question from somebody who's watching the show. Miles Grocott has asked, Amy, do you have a SCE to AUX panel at home as a souvenir or anything? Have you got that panel?
I don't have any official real ones. A friend of mine did give me as a Christmas gift one of these. I guess it's like a little SCE to AUX switch that he ordered. And I actually keep that up in my office, and it's great. It was a very, very thoughtful gift. I mean, what really? I thought, wow, he knew the right thing for our family, and it's good. Yeah, I doubt. I guess that SE aux switch is wherever the command module is for Apollo 12. I can't remember. I think it's in Hampton, Virginia.
Possibly. I'm at a loss at the moment too. I know the Apollo 10 one is in London. That's the only one I know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in the, there's a Langley Space Museum there where, NASA was early years of, and I think it's in that museum. I know the Skylab is one up in Michigan where Jack Lausma, is from.
Yeah. I've seen, I think, one of the Skylab ones, but you're asking too much now. What I wanted to ask you, did you watch day before yesterday the rollout of the SLS rocket at KSC?
I didn't watch the video, but I've seen a lot of things on social media and seen the pictures of it. And, I just, it's a big moment. It's a big moment. And it's so impressive.
It is. I mean, I loved having the shuttle take off and so forth, but my heart is in these huge rockets coming out of there. That's what that thing was designed for, to put the large rockets together. And and this is the thing that they were mentioning on the news while they were telecasting this. The last rocket to launch from that pad of that size was actually the Skylab.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Is it on 39A or B?
B.
It's on
I better be correct with that. I'm going to cop a whole heap of comments going, don't you know anything?
So it was actually the Skylab, the space station itself.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that was it. That was the I guess the last Saturn V that went. Is that correct? Yes,
that's correct. Now, I wanted to ask you, did you watch both launches of your father?
Yes. Surprisingly to me, a lot of families didn't attend different launches. I think, we were military families, and especially the larger families, they couldn't afford to fly their whole family down to Florida, or maybe they had little children and that was hard. So for instance, Apollo 12, I know that the Gordons stayed home, and they have 5 children. And, but the Conrads were there. They were actually out on a boat in the Banana River. So we were at the family viewing site for launch of Apollo 12. And President Nixon was there. He didn't go to the 11 launch, but he went to the 12. Yeah. But he wasn't right near us. He was kind of in another VIP viewing area. But yeah, so we did as a family, we went. And then Skylab, we went as a family too. And I can remember that as a little bit older. I was 10 years old, and it was in July. And so yeah, I remember both launches, and it was very exciting. I'd been to a couple shuttle launches, and obviously Dad didn't fly the shuttle, but as I got older and older, I became more amazed. Yes. And my parents actually my mother and dad never missed a launch once they came to NASA, with the exception of, I think, 13, because they had gone on the Bullseye tour, which was that tour where the crews went for the president and delivered moon rocks to the different countries.
Right.
So that was when they were right on the Bullseye tour. But yeah, my mother went to every launch, and often they had duties to show people around and things like that.
I wanted to ask you, your father was also involved in the Apollo-Soyuz test project, which meant he went to Russia. Now, you went to Russia as well, correct, as a family?
Yes. That was that was right after Skylab. I think soon after he got assigned on the backup crew. And I remember my mother said, "Oh, can't believe he's going to be on the backup crew." She was ready for a break. And, the training's intense. And so pretty much it was 12 to Skylab, SL3 to Apollo-Soyuz, but he was on the backup. So, he had to learn Russian. And of course he was backing up Tom Stafford, and, the backup crew has to pretty much do everything the prime crew does. Mm. And so half the time they would train at JSC or KSC. And then half the time they would go over to Russia, to Star City, to train. And so one summer, the summer of 74, I was 12, we went and joined him for a week. And a lot of the other wives went too. And so that was very interesting. I was the only child that went. And but that was very interesting. We stayed at Star City at the hotel that they had built there for the astronauts to stay, and ate all our meals together. The cosmonauts would eat with us, and then the astronauts and their wives. And while they were off training, often they would take the wives and me, being the only child, on different tours. And one weekend we went even over to Leningrad, then called Leningrad, and St. Petersburg, and visited the Winter Palace. And so it was all the circus, the Russian circus, while they're there. And it was just of course, Cold War was still going. It was the end of the Cold War, but hadn't been glasnost or anything like that. So really, it was very much heart of time of communism. And I remember I couldn't go, but they had Stalin's grave. They used to have him on display there at the Kremlin, but I was too young to go tour that. But they took the wives and the astronauts. So, but the Russian people that I remember meeting were friendly, interested in our lives. We were interested in their lives. One afternoon, I went over to one of the cosmonauts' homes. They had lived in a high-rise apartment there in Star City, and played with his children. He had some children the same age as me. And it was a wonderful experience.
That's fascinating, especially considering in the Cold War, how that just pushed through and did the link up in space. So we're sorely needing something like that right now, I can honestly tell you.
I don't know what'll happen now, although they, I hope that they can keep their friendly efforts within space still. It's hard. I hope so. I hope so for both countries.
Yeah, and hopefully this is all over. But we're not here to discuss politics anymore. We're going to talk about fun stuff like wives' patches and things like that. I wanted to ask you, because you do, like, I know your mum and Barbara Cernan do presentations for people. You do the same thing, correct?
Yes. So it's been a little bit less since the pandemic had hit, only because we had so few in-person events, but it's starting to pick up now a little bit more. Yes, I'll go talk to schools or civic groups, occasionally a museum, something like that, about, my experience growing up during the space race, what it was like. I'll tell, like I said, I tell the family stories. I tell some personal stories that my dad said. I touch on his art, because people like that. They don't often know that. And I talk about his painting, and of course the moon dust they're in his paintings, and how he was committed to telling the story of Apollo. And he likes to, of course, each painting has its own individual story. And so, I do that. And that's starting to pick up again, because we're doing more in-person events.
Oh, good.
And but I don't know how much more I'll keep. I mean, I will obviously keep doing it locally, but my first grandchild is due in August, and so I'm committed now to helping out with that, which I very much am looking forward to. So that'll probably keep me home for a while.
Yeah. Well, then coming back to the presentations you've done for school kids and so forth, are there any moments in where you've been talking that stick out to you, where you might have inspired somebody, or they've come up to you and said something? Is there anything like that you'd like to share?
Well, yes, I think that school kids, they are fascinated about just that I lived through that time. Of course, that's a long time ago for school children now, and 50 plus years. So they are fascinated that it's somebody who lives through that moment. And the funny thing is, kids ask lots of different questions than adults do. And so often they ask me how I felt in different situations. And they often ask me how I feel since my dad's death. And that's because adults don't ask you that, but kids do. And that's okay with me for them. So I do remember, I think about that a lot. They really will ask me, well, how is it now that your dad's dead? And I always say things like, which is truly how I feel. I'll say, my dad died at 86 years old. And I'll say he always felt he had a very long life. And I did too. And he had an amazing life, a fulfilling life. He accomplished so much individually and then even for his country and the world. So I said, so I'm okay with that. And I always say to them, it's your turn now. It's your generation's turn now to carry us into the future of space exploration. And I say, I won't be surprised if when I'm older in my 80s, one day, one of you kids will be going to Mars or farther, or things that I can't even imagine. And so I do. They ask me a lot about that. And I just say, well, you're the future. And that's how I feel. So I feel I have a lot of confidence in future generations. Like I said, the past generations have done so much for us. I believe in the kids of the future too. They'll take us places we can't even dream of. I mean, really, they will.
Exactly. It's like you were writing to me the other day when we were preparing for this, where you said, the pioneers have set the stage and have inspired people to achieve even greater things, and then they in turn will inspire people, standing on the shoulders of giants, like the name of the Apollo 17 30-minute sort of concise film is called.
Right.
And it truly is. That's what I feel. The Mercury guys set the stage for the Gemini guys, who set the stage for the Apollo guys, who were also the Skylab guys, but the Skylab then set the stage for the ISS, for Mir, for whatever else might come. For those who might not know, just to point out, to your left, there is a model of a thing that looks like a windmill. Now, that is actually Skylab.
Yes.
And the windmill-shaped thing, they were actually solar panels which powered the station, along with the one panel sticking out on the side. Now, there was supposed to be, beg your pardon, two panels. One of them got ripped off during launch, and that's where the whole dilemma of Skylab happened. And this is what we were talking about, saving it. The thermal micrometeoroid shield and the solar panel came off on launch due to a structural design faults, shall we say. That's a one possibility they didn't take into consideration. And the Skylab crews were tasked with coming up with a solution. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right where you're in the middle of the thing on the white patch, you'll see a little square there. This is for the audience now, Amy. That is a scientific airlock, and they were supposed to put cameras through and all sorts of measuring devices. And they used that one to put a parasol through, and that parasol took the place of the ripped-off micrometeoroid shield.
Is that up here? Is that what you're pointing to right here?
No, down a little bit further.
Here?
There, yep.
Okay, so that's where the parasol went through. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that, again, within 11 days to come up with an idea like that, save Skylab, and the amount of training, the backup crews, you were talking about the backup crews, the stuff they do. Those guys were the ones in the neutral buoyancy training facility coming up with ways to salvage Skylab to get that panel out. Like Pete Conrad and Joe Kerwin were the ones that went outside, but Story Musgrave and Rusty Swikart were the ones in the neutral buoyancy facility coming up with the ideas, the processes, and you can hear it when they're talking to each other. Rusty is there on Capcom explaining to them exactly how they did it so that the guys up there could carry this out successfully. It's just that's what inspired me. how they salvaged a space station that, for all intent and purposes, was dead in the water, and they managed to bring it back to life and continue its planned life with the 3 crews that went up there, each one of them setting duration records. The first one, 28 days, your dad's mission 59, and the final mission 84 days. In those days, like you were saying as well earlier, they didn't know. They didn't know how the human body would react after 84 days in space, after 59 days. There's another thing that was on Skylab that some people might have heard about but don't quite know, and that was the shower. Did your dad ever talk to you about what the shower was like on Skylab?
Well, he did say it was a kind of a pain to take a shower. You know, it was I know the shower was an experiment, but they didn't shower that often. You know, they didn't really they felt clean. You know, there wasn't didn't have the odors or anything, and so he said it was, you know, just dealing with the shower was a little bit difficult, and they did it a couple times. I remember him saying that you would get the soap bubbles covering your ears, you know, and then you couldn't hear anything. He said all of a sudden you couldn't hear anything because the soap bubbles were stuck to your ears, and so you'd have to, you know, knock them off. And he didn't. I remember one thing he said. He says, I didn't like that. He said, because one of the things that, you know this, Dwight, is you have to be able to hear the alarms. Sometimes you might want to hear a noise. And there was not many times, but a few times in Skylab where they heard a couple of different bumps or shifts. And you know, they worried something had happened. They'd had an emergency or something, maybe a small meteoroid had hit or something, but that never did happen. But so he didn't like that, because he liked to be able to hear, but so he did. Yeah, the shower was a you know, that was something new to try. I don't know what they do on the ISS now. They must have something similar.
I think it's sponge bath.
Yeah,
that's
all they need.
Yeah. I've got a question here actually from somebody, Eric Butters, on what your dad talked to you about. He wanted to know, did your father ever have any serious conversations with you about his experience walking on the moon?
Serious conversations. I don't know that we had serious conversations. He did say that the one thing he often said, and I think many of the guys said this, is, you know, people wanted them to come back and have some life-changing words, philosophical thoughts. But he just said, you know, there wasn't time to dwell on the moment so much. It was there, you know, they were on their checklist and everything was important. They didn't want to get off time. And so he just said that it was more that when he first walked on the moon, it was more he had a feeling that this is what I've been working for all my life, and now I'm here. Even though it wasn't like his whole life that he thought he was going to the moon, but it was definitely a one pinnacle of a career. Even though he felt he had others, obviously, but yeah. So I think it was just a moment you feel so amazed because you've been working so hard, and now here you are, but yet you still have to get home and you still have work to do on the surface. And he said it did seem amazing. And I know other guys have said this, that everybody, you know, you look up and you see the earth and everybody you know is back there. And you're just here with this one person. Then, of course, Dick was circling the moon at the same time. But more his feelings. You know, I think the biggest thing he talked about, and I remember as a child, and he drilled this into me as a child and as an adult, when he came back, or even when he was flying back, you know, it was still a great risk of them, you know, having a problem. And of course, Apollo 13 did. But he said, you know, he felt felt close, like any time they could have died, you know, but they didn't, thank God, you know, they didn't have a problem. But he wanted to always live his life as he wanted to live it. He never wanted to waste a moment. I think he felt that he had pushed that death-defying moments there, and So he always wanted to live as he wanted, and he always felt his time on earth was very precious. And he would say that to me, you know, you only have a short time here. Do what you believe in, do what you want, do what you love. So that was the most things that he talked about from going to the moon. That was what he got out of it. You know, live your passion, be who you want to be. Don't let other people, you know, try to drive your life.
There's that leads me to another thing that I don't know if you're aware of the film your dad did in 1977 with Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura in Star Trek. Your dad was involved in inspiring women to join NASA because the whole film is about, you know, prepping NASA for admitting the new female astronauts. And they showed Nichelle in the lower body negative pressure device, which they used on Skylab. And your dad was explaining to her the reasons why it was done up on Skylab and what they were studying. And I thought, I would love to know how many women who are now astronauts in NASA actually saw that film as young kids or teenagers maybe and were inspired by it. That would be something I would find fascinating.
Well, I think it would be interesting. I've never heard many people say that they saw that film, but I'm reading Eileen Collins' new book that she recently wrote. You know, she was the first commander for a space shuttle mission, and I just read last night what it's kind of inspired her to be an astronaut. And she didn't mention that film. She mentioned just seeing other women become astronauts. And of course, she loved being an Air Force pilot. And that seemed like the next step, you know, as being a pilot. That would be the ultimate. That was just one of the things she said. So I don't know. I'll say this, you know, this is something Dad told me I'll never forget. And I think he probably told me this because I was his daughter. I have an older brother. And he was part of a generation, you know, where women didn't do as much. I mean, they were accomplished, but, you know, they didn't go into lots of different careers and things. Like my mother always said that when she was in college, you either became a nurse or a teacher. And of course, most of the mothers when I was growing up were staying at home. My mother was a teacher, but they were staying at home. So my dad, I think initially didn't think women could become astronauts. That wasn't his first thought. But NASA kind of convinced him that they could be just as good of astronauts as men. And now I know that even towards the end of his life, he felt they could even be better astronauts. He was kind of the den mother for the first astronaut class, and I think it came in 78, that had women. That was like Ray Seddon and Sally Ride and Anna Fisher. And he was kind of, they called him the den mother, but he was kind of in charge of their training. And he used it when it first came about, he thought, oh, these women aren't going to be able to handle these, you know, these different, like the survival or the thing where they go up in the parachute, then they have to learn to get out in the water. And he said they did better than the men usually. And he said they always had good attitudes. And so that kind of changed him as far as thinking, but just because you got to remember, he was of a different generation. But he, after seeing them, he said, no, I think these women can be just as good as astronauts or better. Same with pilots. He felt they could do it all. And he tells a funny story. I don't know if you've heard this story. He said one of the women came to him one day and said, you know, we have these kits that they pack for us that if we need for emergencies that and we want to change them. He said, for instance, the women said, well, you need to put some women's deodorant in there. You've got just men's deodorant in this emergency kit. And he said, and then we would like you to not have boxer shorts for us, but to have regular women panties. And so he said, the funny thing is when we decided these emergency kits, he said, we didn't even ask women what they wanted. Us men just decided what would be in them. And so, you know, they had a lot to learn. And boy, NASA's come a long way. Yeah. And but I know he did. His mind was changed after participating with training with that first group of women. He had a whole new perspective.
That is awesome. That's how change happens. This is what we were saying, building on top and building on top, and who knows how many women those women inspired. I have a question here from Richard Leonard. Coming back to your talks that you give, Amy, he's wanted to know: do you visit any schools in the Washington D.C. Virginia area?
Well, I haven't lately. Things like, well, no, I don't think I have to tell you this. Just now, things are opening up. But I'm actually going to be visiting a school in Arlington, Virginia, and it's the elementary school that my children attended. And it was called Arlington Traditional School, and I'm going to visit there in October. And it's for a special reading challenge they did. And the reason they just called me about a month ago to ask them to do that. And the fun thing about that is Dad actually came and visited and spoke to the children there when my daughter was 6 years old. She's 30 now. So she was just in first grade. And so now they've asked me to come back. And so I really am looking forward to that, because he had spoken then, and now it's my turn. I won't be, it's not exactly the same, obviously, not as good, but hopefully I can do just as good a job. And I know that when my children were there, the other children, they got a lot out of it. And so, yeah, I will be speaking in Arlington, Virginia in October. I don't have a date yet, but I've told them I will definitely do it.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. I really felt for you because, I was working with you and your mum to put the videos together for the introduction for your talks. And then the pandemic hit and I was like, oh, what? No. I think the last thing, Wings Over the Rockies, was what your mum did. And then it all just stopped because of the pandemic.
Well, I'll tell you, on March 4th, let's see, it was 2020, I guess, I spoke at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History. And the next day, the dominoes started to fall. I remember I was driving back from Fort Worth to where I live in Boerne, and I'd heard the South by Southwest Festival at Austin, which was a huge deal here, was canceled. I thought, oh, that's crazy. And of course, soon after that, everything started closing. So, I'm a person, and I think my dad taught me this. You've got to deal with what life hands you. And it gave me a time to work on some things here in my home, to do some writing, to do some family things. So it was, it is what it is. And I'm just glad things are restarting. I got to start rebuilding my speaking skills too. I got doing other things.
If this is anything to go by, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Speaking of speaking, I have another question from the Foxy P. They want to know, did you talk to your dad while he was up on Skylab? Were you allowed to talk to them privately while they were orbiting?
Yes. I remember, this is one of the strongest memories I have. We had a phone. So now I guess they use their cell phones or something. I don't know what they do on ISS, but I think they can talk anytime they want, But then they had a phone in our house, and I remember it sat on the nightstand next to my parents' bed. And every 3 days, my dad would call us. And it was every 3 days because they took turns. Jack would call one day, Owen would call the other day, and then my dad. And they usually had to call when they had reached, when they were coming across over the United States or a certain communication station. So the phone we had went through mission control. And so it would ring and it would be from mission control, and they would patch us through. And it wasn't a long phone call, but yeah, that was a big deal, And I don't remember us. I don't know what my mother talked to him about, but I just remember it would be things like me telling him what I'd been doing. Oh, I went to the swimming pool today, or school started. You know what you talk about with your dad when you're a little kid. And so, yeah, those were important because I think that kept us connected. I know that was important to him because I've looked and I know many people have read David Hitt and Owen Garrett and I think there's one other author, I can't remember his name, book on Skylab, Homesteading Space. And in the back of that book is Dad's journal from that. And if you look in the journal, he talks about how important those phone calls were to him, and I'm sure to the other crew members, because he said, this would be, I remember one comment he wrote in there, he said, this would be the perfect job if we could go home to our wives and families at night. And so I think that was the hard part, just being away from the ones you love, but loved the work. But yeah, I do remember that. And I'll tell you, I don't, as a child, I don't remember it taking that 2 months that he was gone, it didn't seem long to me, but my mother said it did. She was ready. She was like, oh, thank God he'll be home soon. But for me, life went on.
Now, your mum with the rest of the astronaut wives from SL3, they all got dressed up for the return of the astronauts, and they
Yes.
the 18th century style clothing.
They did. And I think I'm telling this story right. Helen Mary Garrett had an idea that they should dress up as pioneer women to meet the guys. And I guess, they were space pioneers. So they would drive, and they got this old car. And so, then they didn't have to go in quarantine. After Apollo 12, of course, Dad, Pete, and Dick went into quarantine for almost 2 weeks. So we didn't see them right away. But anyway, so they splashed down, and then I guess they came back they got to Hawaii, and then they flew back into Ellington. And I might not be telling that exactly right, but so the wives decided they would drive in this car, old-fashioned car, to drive up to meet them when they came off the plane. And Deke was the driver, Deke Slayton, and as I recall. So the women were dressed up, and I think it said 59 days or bust on a sign, as I recall, on the back of the car. And then they each handed the men a yellow rose, the Yellow Rose of Texas. That's a famous song. And each handed when they came off. And so that was just kind of a fun thing that they did. And, always trying to be special, do something different. And, I didn't get to see my father right when he came back from Skylab, because even though he wasn't in formal quarantine, they knew that he had still been away from germs for a while. So the kids kind of stayed away, as I recall. So we weren't there to greet him, but the mothers were, the wives.
Now you can probably see on your screen right now a photo of them meeting the astronauts as they came back.
Yes. And that was a great time.
So I'll just get back to you. There we go. Now I've got another question I'll just scroll. I've missed it. Yeah, from James Frangioni. Is there a particular painting your dad did that's your favorite, if you don't mind sharing that information?
My favorite. I'd have to say that my favorite story is the fantasy. That's just sentimentally, that one appeals to me, because I know that the crew was close, and Dad's wish that Dick could have gone to the moon with them was a feeling that was close to his heart. So I think that definitely is one of my favorites. It's hard to choose one, but I do also like the paintings of the Earth from the moon. There's one, I think it's called the Blue Marble, something like that. I just, I like the color, the black, and of course, what they always say, the blue and white against the blackness of space. But no, I'd say the fantasy is my favorite. It's one of the earlier ones. It doesn't have the moon dust in it, because it was one of the earlier ones, but it has sentimental, but just the story is great. And so you get a great painting with just a great story. And so that appeals to me very much so. It's hard to choose a favorite. It's like as people say, it's like choosing a favorite child.
Yeah.
Have a favorite child. You see them. The other thing I notice is, because I've seen the progression of his career. I look at something like the fantasy. It probably wasn't as good a painter as he was at the end of his life, just because that was many years ago. I think that was from like 97, and he painted until 2018. So but I like that story, so it very much appeals to me.
Oh, cool. I am sorry going through there's so many questions. I have to apologise to the people who have asked questions, and I just don't have the time to answer. So I'm trying to get everybody in. Got a lot of people making comments. A lot of people knew your dad, Amy, and they're all just saying. And I met him as well on several occasions, and he was an absolute gentleman. You know, always had the time. I remember the first time I spoke to him one-on-one. It was in the United Kingdom, and it was for the Autographica show. And there was an after-show dinner, like the celebrity dinner. Sorry, sometimes I go into German. I'm like, what's the English word? And he was at the bar getting a drink, and I was standing behind him, and I said, "Excuse me, Captain Bean." He turned around with it, and I just remember it, the biggest smile on his face, and he said, "Oh, well, what can I do for you?" And we've just asked him. I can't even remember what I asked him, and he had the time. You know, he was with other VIPs and so forth. He had the time to talk to us, and took the time to make sure that what we asked was properly answered. And it was just a fantastic experience. We didn't get to sit at the table with him while we're eating, but we spoke through the course of the thing. At that time, there was no intention of mine to make it to make a movie. Otherwise, I certainly would have included him in it. But he actually does open the film, the younger version of himself, talking about it. And I thought, well, it was not planned that he would do that after he died. I had already put that in there months before, and it just so happened, you know, his untimely passing was. It just fit really nicely, and I thought, well, no, it's staying in there. He's going to open the film because we couldn't interview him. We wanted to. He agreed to it. And we never got a chance to do it because just a time factor, you know. And I thought, well, we'll speak to him at Space Fest, but that's where we got to meet you and your lovely mum. And you took his place in the film too, which gave again another aspect that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And that made me start thinking, wow, you know, a lot of the times no one pays attention to what the families were doing during the time that their husband or father was up in space. And another question, and I can't remember who asked it, but I made a point of it. Do you remember when he was flying in Skylab? Could you actually go outside and see the space station? Was it like a little dot or something in the sky?
You could see it fly over. We didn't have a telescope or anything, but occasionally they would say, "Oh, it's going to fly over Houston tonight," you know, and we'd go. But I don't remember doing that too often. You know, it's funny. In some ways, I was into my own world, if that makes sense. I was supportive of my father, but I wasn't thinking about his career all the time, just like any other child, you know. But so I do remember a couple times doing that, but not every single time that they probably flew over Houston. I was going to tell you the comment you made. A lot of people talk about meeting him. I think I hear that a lot, and that means a lot. My dad wanted to make people feel good. He really felt that way. He was a kind person. He wanted to, you know, we always say the space program inspires, but he wanted to inspire each person individually. It was just something he felt that he could do, and he did do it well. And so he was always sincere. And when he would go to those events, he told me, "Oh, I'd be there 100%. You know, when I'm at my easel painting, I'm there 100%. I'm not going to get on the phone and do anything else. But when I go to these events, I want to be there. These people, you know, made a point to show up, and you know, many of them are. I mean, you're from Germany, but he'll say Americans helped me get there, and I have a duty also to tell the story and to tell the story to the world. You know, it's an important thing. So yeah, he enjoyed that. He wanted to, because he just knew that was important to do. He really cared about people. I guess I'd say that he really did care about people. He really did.
Oh, definitely. I must say as well, you know, the US space program, it inspired a lot of people outside of the United States. Like Australia, lucky for me because I can boast about it, we were there for the tracking station, Honeysuckle Creek and Tidbinbilla and Mouche and Carnarvon. We were there to help those guys while they were up there. And, for us, a little country like Australia, being a part of the American space program, to put people on the moon, to put a space station up there, for us, we were like, wow, we're doing something really cool, helping the world move forward. I've spoken to a lot of the engineers at the tracking stations, and they still to this day. There's one of them, Dr. Phil, who speaks in the film, and he says, I am so honoured that I was there at a time where space became the realm of science fiction and turned into reality.
Yes, yes, it was science fiction, wasn't it? For us, it doesn't seem like science fiction because I grew up, but for other people, you're right, it did. They brought that to reality. It's just amazing, like I said, what humans can do when they really want to do something. I was going to say to you, one thing about this model behind me, that was Dad's model. And so that sat in his house studio. And for many, many years, even before Skylab went up, I remember that sitting on his desk. So yeah, that was his model. And I'll tell you this too, Dwight, the panel that didn't deploy, I remember when he had it on his desk prior to launch of the Skylab. And then when they had the problem and then they fixed it, he took off the other panel, like he broke it off, it used to have two. And I used to think, well, Dad, why'd you break that off? And he said, well, that's what it looks like now. So we have to make this realistic model. So yeah, that was his model. I see these, like you mentioned, the men in Australia that worked at Honeysuckle, they just played such an important part. We couldn't have done it without them. And yet they're unsung heroes. They truly are. They truly are unsung heroes. I truly believe that. There was an obituary on, I guess it was Facebook the other day, of a man who worked on the guidance system for the command module. And I thought, oh my God, such an important person. I saw it because, or maybe I just saw the obituary because Dad and Pete had given him the Silver Snoopy Award, or maybe Dad and Dick, which was a very important award in NASA. So I thought, wow, he must have really done something wonderful. But so yeah, he passed away, and I thought, he must have been a really special person, intelligent, made a difference in the world.
Speaking of models, a gentleman here, Kevin B. Petit, was asking, do you know what happened to the Nick Proch model of Surveyor that was given to your dad? Do you know where that might be right now?
The Nick Proch model of Surveyor was given to him. I'm assuming that it was one that was in Dad's studio when he passed away. And it's probably still in his studio.
Right.
My father, you asked me about the last few years, and I felt that I should say this because I think it's important. My father, I've actually had to be in a state legal situation about his estate. My stepmother has challenged his will. So that has been something that's kind of taken my time for the last 4 years. And so those models were left to my brother and I. All of his space stuff was, because he felt that we were there during that time. And so that has been something I've had to deal with. And I only bring it up because I feel like people should know that this is a situation our family's been dealing with, and it's been very, very difficult. We're actually going to trial on it in May.
Okay.
And so I'm hoping that this is something that will be solved and carried out as my dad wanted. And so that's just where I am on that.
So I didn't mean to go down that path if it was uncomfortable for you. Sorry about that.
I actually feel it's something that should be. One of my feelings too is that, and my dad would feel this way also, you have to do what's right. And sometimes that means standing up and doing what's right. That's what I've had to do in this situation to carry out my father's will. So I'm not embarrassed by it. I think that people should know when other people don't do the right thing. I truly believe that.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for telling that. I'm pretty sure Kevin is very happy with that answer too, I hope. I just wanted to tell you something else. It's in my mind about the influence the American space program had in the world. My wife was born in Poland. Her parents were in Poland during the Cold War, obviously. They couldn't get out, but you'd never believe it. The Polish government allowed them to watch the Apollo 11 EVA, the moonwalk. And I remember when I heard that, I thought, whoa, that's amazing. And they still, to this day, they say, wow, it was fantastic. We in Poland were allowed to watch the Americans walk on the moon. And I thought, wow, what a beacon for freedom that must have been for them.
Well, I think it was for all over the world. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. And I often it would be interesting to know what Alexis says as to how they felt about it. Did they think that that this was something that Americans or freedom or democracy could achieve, or did it give them, or they were just still in awe? They didn't go that. That's a thought I've often had. How did that make them feel?
I was speaking to my mother, who grew up here in Germany. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not German. She remembers vividly her father saying to her, and he was one of the flying for the bad guys, pilots in World War One. But he said, in my lifetime, I've seen the development of the plane, and now I'm watching people walk on the moon. And he was just, wow, I live in fantastic times. And that's the testament to this ability to achieve the impossible, to land on the moon, to put a space station up there. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Well, Dwight, do you have confidence that humans will be going to Mars in the next 20 years or so?
I hope so. I want to watch that live as live can get with a 4-minute delay.
Yeah, no, I believe we'll get there. And that was an interesting thing. That was, I don't know if I've told you this. One time, this was when Dad was still alive, we were chatting once, and I said, well, I think they had just done a test firing of the Falcon Heavy. This was, well, it's probably 4.5 years ago, obviously. And I said, Dad, what do you think of, the Falcon Heavy and Elon Musk? And you know what his first answer was when I asked him what he thought about Elon Musk? He said, thank God he's not a Russian. And that is from someone who fought the Cold War. I'm telling you, that is something they would say because it was in their head. But he thought, thank God he's not a Russian. And so, yeah. Well, I don't think he could have done all he'd done and be in a different society. He had to be able to something where he could accomplish what he wanted.
Yeah.
And but yeah. So he was always surprised by that.
Speaking of fantastic times and so forth, I was talking to a friend of mine on the internet. This is how communications, again, this is something else that was sped along by the Apollo program, the increase in the speed of communication. The step from Apollo communications to Skylab was double the amount. I mean, these days you look at the figures and you go, double that amount? It's like, not even enough to do a voice telephone call over the internet. But back then, that was a big deal, being able to get all this data. Anyway, I'm on the internet talking to a friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, did you know the Starlink rocket is about to launch?" So I watched the launch live, and I see them put a map of where the launch trajectory was taking the rocket. And I said to Alex, I said, we've got to go on the balcony. This is going to fly over Cologne. So we went out there, and 10 minutes later or 20 minutes later, we saw the speck of light come flying over, and we raced out then into the front street, and we watched it fly away. And you just stand there and you go, that's incredible. I just watched this thing launch live on television from Florida, and now we're seeing it come over and fly here. And I thought, I will be very happy when I can see a rocket like that with people in it. Doing the same thing. We tried it with Inspiration 4, but it was too cloudy, unfortunately. That's when people ask me, why did I come to Germany? I always tell them it's the weather, because, in Australia, we just don't know cloudy weather and rainy and snow. What? No, I don't want that. I don't want blue skies and warm weather. I want to have the clouds. So unfortunately, that blocked our view of Inspiration 4. But I always keep an eye when the things launch. Do they fly over us? And with the exception of that one time, it's always cloudy.
Well, that's just where you live.
I know.
No. I get an alert on my phone when ISS flies over me. Do you have that on your phone?
No. Do you remember when we did the world premiere in Huntsville for Searching for Skylab? And then as we were standing there and they announced to us, oh, the ISS is flying over, and I went, okay, the universe and God is on our side for this one.
That's right.
That was.
You talk about one of the things that Mother used to always say with regards to Apollo, and I think it's still going on. I mean, it has to be. Is she said, the flights then, were going every 3 months. It was very fast. We had, Apollo 7 and then 8 and then 9. It was every 3 months. And she said they were building on themselves. And so everything built on itself. And that how it did. They'd see if the command module worked. And then now we got to test the lunar module. Anyways, I see that still, and I have to assume in space, every mission is building on itself to get us to the next step. I don't know if people realize that. They'll think, oh, what's going on with this flight or this mission? But I think everything is a step closer to getting us, whether we're going to go back to the moon or go to Mars or whatever they want to do, So I think you can't do it all at once. And I think that was Skylab. Skylab was something, it was a stepping stone. It was a stepping stone to the next, to the shuttle, ISS. And there's so many stones you have to step, the communications, the launches, like you said, even when the Skylab came back into Earth, they learned a lot from that. And they still evaluate the data. I read now that there's, and there's lunar samples that they've never opened. You know this, right?
Yes.
And a lot of that is because they knew they would have greater instruments, that would be improved instruments to study it. So they kept fresh lunar samples. So I think it's always building on itself, and technology is always getting better. And thank goodness.
Well, look, Amy, we're coming to the end of our talk. I wanted to ask you: is there you have a website, correct? And you have
Yes.
things on there that might interest some people?
Yes. So my website's moonwalkerdaughter.com. Kind of a handful, but mouthful. But I like the name, and I think it's appropriate. And yes, I think I have a couple different things on there. There's my patch. I designed that logo. That's my logo.
Oh,
and
wow,
patch.
cool.
And as you can see, it's a rendition of an astronaut. And there's the paintbrush in the back. And of course, Dad's holding the hammer, which he used in this art. And so you can buy that patch on there. I have some photos that I had printed that were public photographs of NASA on the moon. Yeah, there's a painting, the backlit painting I have behind me, reaching for the stars.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, that's
Great minds think alike.
Stars with the 6.
I'll just go through the photos that I've got.
Yes, that's one of the photos. That's Dad. And if you look on the back, I wrote a story about that.
Yes,
and I called it Snapshots, kind of a personal story, and even how it relates to painting. So yes. So that's what I have on my website. Or you can look at photos. Just want to go look at some old photos.
I wanted to show that one. That's a colorized black and white photo. It looks fantastic.
That story is an interesting story, one that was kind of close to Dad's heart. His father Arnold Mean was a soil scientist, and he was employed by the National Geological Service, by the Department of Agriculture. And when he was a boy, every few years they would move to a different area near a river because he used to study soil near rivers and things like that. And anyways, that's why he was born in Wheeler, Texas. It was in Texas. And then anyways, but so Dad he always thought about that picture. He said, I think it's so amazing that my dad was a soil scientist on Earth. And then when I went up to the moon, I had to take soil samples. So in a way, he felt really connected. He was he very much admired his father. And so that his parents were a huge influence on him. He loved them very much. They loved him. He credits them to so much in his life. But he used to just love that he was able to be a soil scientist on the moon like his father was a soil scientist on Earth.
That is fantastic. That is really fantastic. I've got a photo. I had to show it. I was going through some of the pictures you sent me, and I thought this one I'd like people to see. It's with you and your dad in front of the paintings he did. Just give me a moment. Are you able to see that?
That's a great photo. I remember taking that photo. Of course, that's Neil and Buzz, First Men, the paintings. And yeah, we both look really happy there. And we had a great relationship. We were close. You know, I think for a lot of astronaut kids, and this is really, I found, because talking to other astronaut kids is really related to the age you was when your dad flew in space. I really feel this way. You know, I was 6 when my dad walked on the moon. So I was pretty young. And then I was 10 when he was in Skylab. And so for me, it was a very exciting experience. I didn't feel like he was gone from home. I think astronaut kids who were teenagers, it was a little bit harder. You know, that's a different time in life. You don't want to be the center of attention. Maybe you need your parents there more, just completely different time. So, but yeah, we were always close. I miss him. I love that photo. I could see he's giving me a big hug. He was a great hugger. He just always was. And yeah, I just really, it's hard to lose a parent, but you know, I guess life goes on. I've got a grandbaby coming, little boy. And so that next generation, maybe he'll go into space. That one never knows. One never knows.
I've got one more. I'm going to embarrass you with this one, but I have to show it. I have to show it. There we go.
Yes, that was our official photo for the Apollo 12 mission. It's a funny photo. Anyways, it was the official one. You know, they would show that, though. Here's the Alan Bean's family. And I'll tell you what, see that paint? You can't see that painting above the mantle. But that was, I don't know if that painting exists anymore.
Oh,
it was actually a clown. And it was probably a painting my dad did in Patuxent River. And I don't think it exists anymore. I've never seen it. He didn't want to keep his early paintings because he didn't want that to be reflective of his abilities. But yeah, that was at our home in Nassau Bay. And so that was 1969, long time ago.
Oh, I got another one. This is with a special dress that you and your mum were wearing for the Skylab mission.
Yes. When you put that up, I'll tell the story. Oh yeah. So this is a cute. So this is splashdown day for Skylab. You know, always after splashdown, the wives go out and talk to the press. So this was in September, I think, 25th, something like that, of 1973. And we went outside to my mother to talk to the press. And this flag behind us, you don't see this because it's the middle of the day, but it had lights on it. And so we had that American flag like lit up every night when my dad was on Skylab. You know, that was kind of almost like it was in our yard, and that's our front yard. And these skirts, Barbara Cernan, she lived next door to a woman who actually, this shows the small community that we lived in Nassau Bay. The woman that moved into the Chaffee home from Apollo 1, she was a wonderful seamstress. and she sewed these skirts for my mother and I. And so, yeah, we had these matching skirts, and we wore them on Splashdown Day. And I can see, just, you can't see great in the picture, but my mother's wearing the pin that my dad took to Apollo 12, which was a replica of the astronaut wings, gold, that he took down to the moon. And my mother's passed that on to me. I wear it now. And I think I'm wearing my Skylab medallion, and it's in my hand, the silver one.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so, yeah, that was a great day. And Dad came home a day or two after that.
Also, actually, I've got another photo of the color one of the flag, and you can see it a little bit clearly. You can see the lights in it. Won't be a moment.
Yeah, it was lit. Now, I think, and in that picture, you can see Tracy Cernan is with me. This was that we had a splashdown party. That's why we're holding drinks with cups, cups with drinks. We've been celebrating with friends. This was another good friend down the street. Her name was Camille Shaw. We were all close. And I think now, I'm pretty sure that this flag, Gene Cernan went up in December of 72 on Apollo 17, and I think that was in their yard for that mission. And then they gave it to us, as I recall.
Right. Okay.
So it had double duty. I think it served duty for Apollo 17, and then it did for us on Skylab, because gosh, it was just the next spring. I mean, that's how fast things were,
Yeah.
That was just the next spring. So yeah, I think
that's what many people consider sort of the tail end of the major space race. And still, like you were saying, they had a launch in the 17 launch in December. Then in May they launched Skylab. In May, then SL2. In July, SL3, and in November, SL4. And then came the big break. They concentrated on Apollo-Soyuz, and then came the really long break until 1981 when the shuttle launched.
Mm-hmm.
And a little interesting story that'll bore everyone to tears. This is my personal story. That was the first launch that I actually watched live, STS-1. And I specifically asked my parents to wake me up because it was 4:00 in the morning in Sydney, Australia. And we carried on one of the private channels, they had the live feed of the launch. And I remember sitting there at 4 a.m. watching this thing fly up. And then at the evening of the same day, we could see it flying over, because obviously its flight path was over Honeysuckle. So Sydney is in that footprint. And we actually watched it fly over. And I thought, wow, there's the space plane that I had heard about since I was a little boy, flying over Sydney. I thought, wow, that's fantastic. So thank you, everybody, for listening to my incredibly exciting story. Back to you, Amy.
Well, I think it just, it's an example of how much space exploration touches people. And honestly, just seeing it, I think that when I see the ISS fly over me now, it's in a way, it makes it more real. There doesn't seem like they're so far away. And I don't know, it brings it down to earth, literally,
Exactly. And as you can see, there is absolutely no evidence of the space program having any influence on my life at all.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll tell you what, it's a positive influence. It's a positive influence.
Yes.
That's one of the things I often say when people want to say, oh, we didn't walk on the moon or something. I'll say, why do you not want to believe that? It's not like you're saying people are making up some negative conspiracy theory. They're making up something positive about human civilization and accomplishments. Why would you not want to relish in that? Relish what humans can do. I mean,
I do.
You know that. Yeah. But so I don't, it's almost like people want to just run the race down or something.
Or have their 15 minutes. Who knows? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, anyways, we don't focus on them, but I often think that, why do you not want to believe positive things about life?
Yeah.
And that's and human civilization's next step into the universe. There's nothing as positive as that. I mean, there's a lot of things, but that's a very good thing. That's a good thing to think about, exploration.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to what the new SLS rocket will bring us with the lunar orbit, and then hopefully lunar touchdown. And I said to my wife, I am going to be there for the launch of the lunar mission, that's for sure. I want to be at KSC. I've never seen a real rocket launch live. I've seen it on television many a time, but never stood there. I can only imagine the booming of how the rocket is something as big as the SLS. When that thing takes off, you know it's taken off. That is something I'm very much hopefully looking forward to. I need to be able to get out there. Hopefully there's no pandemic or whatever going on that doesn't allow me to fly out there.
Well, it's in Florida. You can go to Florida, no problem. But anyways, I think everybody should see a launch. I think I don't just say that because I've seen launches or I care about space. I just think it's a fabulous thing to see. It's it's amazing. I don't know how else to say it. You never forget that, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, especially for somebody like you who cares so much. So you should definitely make the effort to see a launch.
I have to talk to the boss. She's behind me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely. I went to a launch a couple of years ago. I don't even think it's been 2 years of this Northrop Grumman Cygnus rocket that resupplies the space shuttle. They invited me. It was out of Wallops Island, Virginia. They invited me because they had named the rocket Alan Bean. And I took my youngest son, and it's always moving. Any rocket launch is just, it's just emotional and moving, and just knowing what it's going to do. And yeah, I think people should do that. I think it's well worth the effort, well worth the time.
Thank you. I'm going to record that snippet that you've just said. And anytime I hear, I don't know if we can go, I'll just play it and go, listen, can't argue. I wanted to tell you from Alyssa Young from the Deke Slayton Museum. They've been joining us today, and they are very, very happy. She just says, thank you for hosting, and I'm so glad I found it today. So you've got big thanks from the Deke Slayton Museum for appearing today and just telling your story. Very much appreciate it.
That's great. And let me say something about that Dad said about Deke Slayton. One of the things we talked about a couple times. Well, I said, Dad, what is a painting that you hadn't done that you would have liked to do, or an idea? And he said, he had a book of ideas, of paintings he wanted. I want to tell this story. I want to paint this. I want to paint that. He said, I wish I could come up with a great idea to paint something to honor Deke Slayton. He said, I haven't been able to come up with something. See, he was recording Apollo, so he couldn't go paint Apollo Soyuz. He was really reporting Apollo to the moon. That was really what he was focusing on. So he said, he said, Deke was such an important, or one of the most important people in getting us to the moon, to Apollo, a great leader. I know that was something that he thought about. How can I honor Deke Slayton in my art? Maybe he would have come up with something if he'd lived longer, but really and let me say one other thing about Deke Slayton, and this is interesting. I got a number of books that were sent to me that were Dad's books after he died. He was very much into self-help, self-improvement. And I got this book, and it was one of these self-improvement books where you kind of like answer questions, like, what was an impactful moment in your life? What are those kinds of things? And one of the questions in the book, and he had filled it out and pages of this. And one of the questions was, who are your heroes? And one of his heroes was Deke Slayton. He really, really thought highly of him. And so I just say that because they mentioned about the Deke Slayton. I don't think people knew how much he admired him.
Oh, I'm so glad he also got his flight on ASTP as well, finally.
Yes.
He really deserved it. I think it meant the world to him that he was able to fly at least once, and on a really important mission like ASTP. So, Amy, look, I think we've come to the end. We've got as many questions answered, hopefully, as we could. Really wanted to thank you for your time. We've been talking about this for years. Actually, before the pandemic, I wanted to do a show with you, and I'm so happy we finally managed to do it. Looking forward, hopefully, at some point, to come out to the United States and say hello to you in person again. It's always great to catch up with you. I've just got somebody telling me they're going to have to rewatch the film Searching for Skylab, which I always think is a very good idea because, without sounding too modest, it is a good film.
It's a great film. So many awards that you've won. It's a great story, a great moment in human history. Really, it's fabulous. I hope people rewatch it.
There's one thing again, it's funny how your dad links into the story. I saw him at it was just himself in London about I think it was 10, 12 years ago, and he said the road of development is never a straight line. It goes like this, and I can tell you honestly, the making of this film was not a straight line. It went forward, it went backwards, it went up, it went down. I'm just so thankful that there's people out there that like it. It's been an amazing adventure to be able to tell the story of people like your dad, of a portion of their life that they were fully into and appreciated the magnitude of it, but a lot of the general public have forgotten about it. Again, the title, The Forgotten Triumph. There is so much good stuff that came out of Skylab. I say to everybody when they go, I wouldn't mind getting into it, I say, be warned, once you start, you can't stop, because there is so much information out there that you just read it and you go, wow, they did this. Incredible, incredible. So again, thank you so much. And please be the proxy for your dad. Thank you so much to him for the inspiration. Without knowing it, when I saw him talk before I had any plans of books and films, words that he said stuck in my head, and it prompted me to preserve the legacy in my particular way. It's been fantastic to tell the story. It's just a joy seeing people start to appreciate what Skylab had achieved now. There's a lot more activity on social media now with regards to Skylab. There's people like Emily Carney, there's Brian Fiore, there's our helper here, Johannes. Johannes is a walking, talking encyclopedia of Skylab, I must say that much. You say, Johannes, did you know about the story, blah, 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 and then he will go, yeah, and he will research the whole thing, and he'll have a stack load of information. I'm like, how does he do that? Puts me to shame, actually. Then you've got my wife Alexandra, who I always say my mission is now complete because I've gotten her infected with the space history bug. And she can rattle off now all the crews from Apollo 7 right through to Skylab SL3. And I'm like, I've done it.
That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. Well, that's good. No, I think your film, your film is making people aware. Video is so powerful. But I think it's David Hitt's book and Owen Garrett's book, Homesteading Space. I actually recently listened to that on audio, on Audible, Amazon's Audible. I thought it was a great audio book. So if somebody wants to see your film, maybe they haven't read the book, but they don't have time to read it, it's a great book to listen to in the car. I was impressed. So I highly recommend that too. And Skylab's a great story. I mean, It really is. It was a fine moment in space exploration history.
Yes, there's no other space station that's ever sent me to bed terrified that it was going to strike my house. It's done great things. I remember waking up the next morning going, oh, phew, as a 10-year-old, you think it's only going to land on your house. And hearing that it landed in Esperance, Baladonia and Rawlinna, and we have to get you out there. They loved you. You were part of the 40th anniversary celebrations there with the interview with little Connie and Linda from the museum. I beg your pardon, I didn't get any water. Now, obviously, my throat's dry, so I'm coughing. I cannot think of a more beautiful landing place or final resting place for Skylab. The area is just magnificent. And we have to get you out there somehow. By hook and by crook, we'll
I'd
get
love to
you
get
out
out
there.
there. I actually been to Australia, of course, big country. I know that. One time, went to Sydney, and that was with Dad in, I think it was 1976 or 77. We had gone, he had an event and he took me. So I haven't been back. It's a long time ago. I haven't been back, and need to get to that part of the world. So I'll do that, and hopefully that won't be too far away.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, they've just opened their borders again, so hopefully everything's getting back to normal then. So we'll see how it all goes. So again, thank you, Amy. Thank you to everybody who showed up. I cannot tell you enough, Amy, how many people are saying, I've met your dad. He was an absolute gentleman. One of the most important meetings of my life. I'm here reading this over and over from people. So, just oh, hello.
I'm here now. I do
Sorry,
have a little
sorry.
on me for
Yes,
some
it
reason.
just told me there it was dropped out. I don't know if you heard that, but I'll say it again. I'm reading a lot of stuff from people who just are so appreciative of your dad and what you have done, how much it meant to them to be able to meet him. To hear you speak tonight, we're getting just positive stuff from people. And this is what you were talking about. People are being inspired tonight, hopefully, and that's all we want to do.
Well, I tell you, that would make him feel so good. He really, truly, like I said, wanted to inspire people, wanted to make a difference, to help them live their dreams. He truly felt that way, and so I'm glad to hear that. And maybe just me talking about him reminds people.
Yes.
Reminds people that I have a dream and life is going by, and I need to get on achieving it, because it does take work. No doubt about it. My dad, I remember one time he said to me, and I got to get off. He said, "What have you done today to make your dreams come true? You've got to do something every day." He said, he would say things like, "You got to do something every day." And so I remember him asking, "What'd you do today?" And I didn't have a good answer. I didn't have a good answer. I could answer better now, but then I don't think. I was a little bit younger, mom of 3 young children. I don't know. I was like, I'm getting through the day today, but yeah.
There you go. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much again. We're getting everybody saying thank you. And my brother showed up too. Hi, Kirk. May I introduce you to Amy Beam, daughter of Alan Beam. He knows all about you. He's never met you, obviously. He's out in Australia watching at, what's the time now? 6:30 in the morning.
Well, good for him. He's an early riser like me. I'm an early riser. I'd probably be watching then too. So good for him.
Yes, completely not like me. We're night owls. Awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it was good
Thank you so much.
Connect with everybody. And I miss seeing everyone. Hopefully it won't be too long till we all pass each other.
Exactly. It all comes back. I'm going to have a drink of water once we're done. Thank you so much. Thanks for putting up with my croaky voice here at the end of it. Sorry, I'm looking at 2 empty glasses going, well, yeah, good on you. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Take care.